Everyone, welcome to the Christian Life with Chase Holmes here. Thank you for joining. And we're going to be jumping into the fourth video series here of the Sermon of the Mount series here, which has been really exciting and really nice to go through here. So again, thanks for joining. So let's join right into it. Today we're going to be talking about Matthew 5:27 through 30 here, where Jesus talks about lust and adultery and breaks that down even further, which is really interesting. So I'm going to start here, of course, with the verse, which is, "You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. For it is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. For it is better for you to lose one part of your body than your whole body to be thrown into hell." Okay, so let's start here with the breakdown. Christ is forbidding to look at people with pure intent to lust. Okay, so it is not a sin to simply go out and recognize beauty. If you see a beautiful woman, that's obviously perfectly fine. That's perfectly natural. It might even be encouraged in certain ways, right? If you're trying to actually find your wife and you're trying to make genuine conversation. It is when we actually look within us to specifically conceptualize a pleasing sexual desire or activity is when it usually becomes lust, right? And sexual desire belongs to a covenant between you and your wife. A lot of people obviously know that. But the interesting thing is that the 10th commandment here, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife. Christ actually alters this commandment by correlating specifically the hand with lust here, and we'll see this a little bit later on here as we get more into the breakdown. But Christ is insisting that to lust after another man's wife is to steal, which is really interesting. Unfortunately, the difference between lust and casually looking or appreciating whatever another man's broad or whatever people say nowadays is very thin. Razor sharp, however you want to put it. It's highly likely it's not like it's not like going and looking at somebody and then continuing to look at somebody that's beautiful. It's going to stay the same. Especially as a man, it's very easy to slip into over-sexualizing her, and particularly in the way that some women dress, even in the way some men dress, but in particular the way some women dress nowadays. It's very easy to slip into that because of our own natural sexual desires that are supposed to be implemented into a marriage, but we may not be married, and so we have that natural desire to want to go somewhere else with it because we have a willness to sin factor. We have our free will to do whatever immorality that might come to us. And so we must, yes, maybe recognize beauty, but it must stop there, and we must continue to focus on our lives. So that's the point I'm trying to make. It's very thin, and it's much easier for a lot of men nowadays to slip into lust than it is to appreciate genuine beauty. And again, so it's highly likely that lust will first hit the eyes before it makes way into your life. And I'm sure you've noted this plenty of times, in particular if you struggle with lust, 75% of the time, whatever, maybe higher than that, it starts with the eyes. It starts with something hitting your eyes. And then you might envision it, and unfortunately you might focus on it just a little bit too long. It doesn't take long before, unfortunately, sin, it becomes sin. And again, we live in an over-sexualated world that makes things much more difficult to stop these things from happening as well, because there's so much lust that will hit the eyes because we live in an over-sexualated world, that we have to have more discipline, that we have to know how to obey Christ and in a much more different way, and we have to read the scriptures in a much more different way, and we have to get around mentors and elders that have been in the faith for much longer in order to stay in that obedient lifestyle. And Christ clearly takes this teaching to the extreme as to ensure that we understand and deal with this sin very carefully, because this sin is easily the more difficult sins to deal with and to get away from. And he is saying to cut off your members or your culprits, and this is going to be different for everybody. It's going to be a situation to situation type thing. But any way to sin must not be engaged with, as lust is lust. So we are to behave as if our eye and our hand are literally removed, because that is the level of obedience that Christ is trying to obey to his audience in the sermon. Obviously not saying that you need to literally cut off your hand or literally remove your eye. No, Jesus is obviously speaking in metaphor there, but metaphor for effect, so that when people later read in context, or when people learn in context, people will understand that they need to take it to that extent, because that is the level of obedience that for somebody struggling with this will need to go to overcome this sin. And I'm preaching to the choir here. I'm preaching to myself about this sin. For many, this will mean declining certain films, music, friends, TV, technology, etc. Again, especially in this day and age, we're filled with constant stuff flooding our brain with useless crap that doesn't matter, that's filled with, people dressing in provocative ways, and it's ridiculous. And we need to get away from it, including myself, and I need to work on this. And this is, from what I have learned and what people believe, that what Christ is referring to by it is better to lose one part of your body or one of your members, depending on what version of the Bible you're reading, than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. Now again, that could be a whole other video of, like, are you living a hyper grace lifestyle? Is your faith genuine, etc., etc. That's another video. But as you can see, Christ takes this to the extreme, and for good purposes. And he does this with a lot of the, main messages throughout the Sermon on the Mount, so that people would take him seriously, and so that they understood that he did speak with authority, and so that people would read in context and wouldn't have to dive into what he was saying, and so it didn't just skip across their brain. And if it did skip across their brain, which a lot of it would, they would still read into it, or people would read into it in different ways. Not everybody was meant to understand what Christ was saying, but the people who did understand what he was saying, they understood what he was saying because they needed to understand what he was saying, because they needed to, in their hearts or in their lives, or somebody was suffering. And yeah, I'm going to close it off here. Thank you for joining. I hope whoever watches this video or watches this content on my school community, that they've got something from this or learned something, or maybe they just had some enjoyment listening along with me and learning along with me here. So God bless you, and take care.